This episode is sponsored by Meter, the company building better networks from the ground up. Meter delivers a full-stack networking solution, wired, wireless, and cellular, all in one integrated system. From design and deployment to management and support, Meter takes care of it all so your business can stay fast, secure, and connected. Thanks to Meter for sponsoring. Go to meter.com/fierce network to book a demo now. That's meter.com/fierce network.
A major vendor shifting focus, a spectrum tug of war, and the unavoidable rise of AI have people wondering, what's next for private wireless? So let's find out. I'm Diana Gooverts, and this is the 5-9. Late last year, Nokia made a surprise move. The vendor, who is actually a leader in the private wireless market, announced it would pivot to focus on mission critical private networks and explore the sale of its enterprise campus edge unit. Needless to say, that left both its partners nervous and its competitors salivating. But it also raised questions about the CBRS band in the US, despite Nokia's reassurances. Why? Because the shared band is currently the subject of a spectrum tug of war. That tug of war, coupled with Nokia seemingly taking a big step back and the unavoidable rise of AI and its new network needs, has people wondering where things are headed. And that is exactly the question we hope to answer today. With me today are Salona CEO Rajiv Shah and Asad Khan, Research Director at SNS Telecom. Here we go. Asad, Rajiv, it is great to be here with both of you, but I want to dive right in and get our sea legs here, if you will, with a little bit of context. So, what segments comprise the private wireless market and what trends are impacting the market today? So, Assad, do you maybe want to start for us?
Yeah, so really, like, there's different ways of looking at what segments comprise it. So, first of all, if you look at the network size, you've got these localized 5G networks on one end, and you've got sort of these wide area networks for some of the industries like public safety, utilities on the other end. Uh, both of them, we're seeing growth in both of them. And then if you look at from a vertical perspective, you've got all sorts of industries like manufacturing, warehousing, aviation, and some of the other verticals I mentioned previously. So lots of different ways to look at it. So and growth pretty much in every segment we're seeing. So in particular, the segments we're seeing the most growth in these days, and we expect to see a lot of growth in the coming years. It's sort of like the industrial, where we have applications in industrial AI and automation, sort of manufacturing, warehousing, transportation hubs. We've got AGVs being connected by localized 5G networks. You even got some of the AI applications. For example, you've got video or images being transmitted of 5G and that being read by machine vision software doing quality control and things like that. So
Rajiv, what does the market look like from your perspective at Salona?
Yeah, I think Asad actually gave one very important distinction that I want to echo because it's, I think, one that's lost on many people. I think there is what he called the wide area private networks. I have always thought of that as not necessarily a very new thing, candidly. There has been the concept of custom networks for almost 2 decades. We have now bundled it inside private networks and so on. It's a very critical segment. It's things like utilities, it's things like smart cities, it's big, wide area networks. What I think is new is this idea of private 5G inside the enterprise. And candidly, I expect that's going to be the more disruptive function. That's going to be the higher growth as you look at the next 5 to 7 years. And it's also going to be the one that's, as things develop, will eventually really start to catch everyone's attention. And the way I think of that part of the market is I almost think of that as like the early 2000s for Wi-Fi in the enterprise, right? I mean, we did start to have laptops, and Wi-Fi was a non-trivial market in the early 2000s. But eventually it had the iPhone, iPad moment, MacBook Air moment, and then it became part of pop culture. And I think robotics is leading us there. And we talk about AGVs and we talk about AMRs and we talk about robots. But the ground reality is they are in their, I'll call it the Windows mobile version right now. The iPhone version of robotics hasn't yet showed up. And I think we can all see it coming. And we don't know who is going to be the maker, and there might be five. But when that happens, is I think when this really takes off. So, an interesting market today, but one I think that's really setting the foundation for something significantly bigger in the next few years.
The market obviously is, as both of you mentioned, is changing and growing. uh, One thing that happened recently that was very interesting was Nokia, who is a very large player or has been in this space, recently kind of announced that they were making a pivot. So Rajiv, I wanted to follow up here on this question with you to see, is this kind of a blip on the radar? Is this indicative of some sort of more structural change in the market that will impact other players and customers? How are you and how are your customers interpreting this move?
I think there are two or three elements to be worth considered. I think number one, you have to evaluate or you have to analyze that decision, which, by the way, I'm not in a position to truly speak for, but based on the public statements, um, you have to view it in the light of what was the other set of products they were focusing on, and that's clearly AI network infrastructure. So if somebody were to honestly ask me, is private 5G as big a market as AI network infrastructure, I think I can honestly say no. And I think that's an easy thing for all of us to agree on. But that does not mean private 5G is not big. It does not mean it is not growing. It does not mean it is not strategic for the enterprise customers who are deploying it. But I think it is an internal business decision that I can somewhat intellectually understand, that when you have the opportunity to add tens of billions to your top line, selling to five customers, versus you have the opportunity to add hundreds of millions to revenue, selling to thousands and tens of thousands, I can see the ROI analysis. So I think that's what that decision reflects more than anything about the private 5G market. Now, the second thing is, okay, so what does the market do about it? I think that's the more interesting question. And I have, this was a great illustration of something that a mentor used to always tell us in the previous startups, that as a young company, you're not actually competing against this big multi-billion dollar company. What you're really competing against is a BU inside of a product line inside of that company. And I think this was a classic example of that. And so for all of us, we are, I think, going to see the ripple effect of that big comparison, and then now what is the competitive landscape we all deal with, and etc. And I think the nature of the beast for a company like Salona, just stay true to your North Star. We continue to believe that this is going to be the future. We have never been in it for a year or a 2 year period. We have believed this is the next decade of how industrial automation is going to get connected, and just keep doing it. And I think, quite honestly, we'll hopefully reap some benefits of one lesser competitor.
Rajiv, your comments about kind of five customers generating billions versus many smaller customers generating hundreds of millions. I mean, Assad, I think that was reflected in some data that you guys had recently that showed Nokia crossed the, I think, 1,000 deal mark in Q4. Can you talk about that a little bit and maybe weigh in on how you expect this kind of shift at that player to impact the market?
Yeah. So basically, like, I mean, they've crossed the 1,000 deployment mark just recently at the end of Q4 2025. But I mean, if you look at their contracts, you've got some wide area networks within private network, within their private networks business, that where you have deals like, sort of crossing $100 million per deal, like, so for utilities and public safety. Then on the other hand, you have like, a $1 million contract for a small, port, or other similar sort of facility. So, I mean, in the wide area segment, they've only got like pretty much Ericsson as their competitor. In the localized 5G network segment, like, they've got so tons of different companies, Salona included, and so many others. So, I mean, it's not really efficient for them to compete, in that segment as effectively as they can, in the wide area network segment. And it's the margins as well. I mean, there's systems integration involved and some of the other aspects that kind of reduce their margins significantly. So I think they're just trying to optimize, their business based on that as well.
And that makes a lot of sense. I think, Rajiv, you also said the same thing. It's all about optimization and focusing your efforts where they're most effective for your particular company. Um, I don't want our entire conversation to be dominated by Nokia, but I do want to ask a quick question about Spectrum, right? Because Nokia was one of the big proponents of the CBRS band in the US. And that, for anybody who doesn't know, is a shared spectrum band, which means it has many users. It also opened the door for a ton of private wireless deployments because there were both um, general access licenses as well as priority licenses in that band. So, Assad, can you kind of give us any sort of insight into what proportion of private wireless deployments tend to use CBRS? Or, yeah, or just how important is it would be really great context.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you look at the US market, it's very, very important. Like, if you look at the numbers, it's, many, more than 50%, I would say, if you can taking into account some of the operator spectrum ones as well. So, I mean, there was a lot of scaremongering last year with some of the regulatory, things going on. But to be honest with you, it appears safe for now, CBRS. I mean, most deployments you see these days in the US are based on CBRS. Even some of the, I mean, in addition to the localized ones, even some smart city networks are based on CBRS spectrum. So, I mean, I'm sure Salona has got a few deployments as well. Uh, so yeah, I think it's very, very important, and I think that's one of the reasons that's kind of taken the US market off the ground in the last 5 years. I mean, if it weren't for CBRS, you wouldn't see this many networks right now, to be honest with you. So
Rajiv, I see you nodding your head. Talk to me about CBRS and how it's played into what you guys do.
We started in CBRS. We obviously now have a variety of spectrum bands, but I would say majority of our networks even today are in CBRS. I think it is going to always be the least friction method for an enterprise to build their own private 5G network. There are always going to be some cases where you need the extra guarantee of licensed spectrum. I don't think I'll ever rule that out. But a majority of deployments will be done in CBRS, and quite honestly, the rest of the world has followed. Everybody has a variant on industrial slash private slash local 5G spectrum. And I think, as Asad said, I think there was some, I will call it intellectualization around possibilities, but I don't think there was any real consideration. I think beyond just industrial and private 5G, I mean, CBRS is used for fixed wireless. It's used for so many things in this country. And as I said earlier, I'll reiterate, we really are in the early innings of this. I think CBRS is going to enable just a massive modernization of industries in this country and anywhere in the world. And so I suspect that's not going anywhere, and I don't think anyone's seriously thinking about that either.
I think that's the perfect transition to go from talking about where things have been and how we got to where we are to looking towards the future. So, Rajiv, maybe you can lead on this one, but what do you see as the future for the private wireless market? So, are there going to be new focus areas? Is there going to be some new spectrum? Where do you see things headed?
First and foremost, I would say the world of AI is not going to be divorced from the world of private 5G. I think today they're viewed as two different worlds. But the reality is, when we started the company in 2019, I remember pointing to all these use cases because we didn't have the nice shortcut term called physical AI. Now I can easily just use to say, if you want physical AI in a manufacturing plant, in a warehouse, in a transportation yard, in a refinery, in an oil and gas well, I can keep going, in a hospital. Candidly, there is no other technology that is going to provide wireless connectivity but for private 5G. That's the only option. So, to an extent, to me, those two worlds merging is probably going to be the journey we are all on for the next 4 to 5 years. I look at the customers and what they're using the network for today. and you can see that you are kind of barely scratching the surface, right? One of the top use cases, top business values that customer talk to us about is connected worker. Okay, so what do they do when they do a connected worker? Is they're providing an industrial tablet or a handheld or maybe a walkie-talkie or some version of those devices to these users. But that has existed for 15, 20 years. What is interesting is now what happens when you have true physical AI, when you have robots and humans in that same facility. What happens when there are actual digital and physical agents that are actually processing the data from those machines and taking decisions and closing the control loop right there without any impact? So, I mean, that's a wave of automation that is right now sitting in labs, that is sitting inside all of these big and small companies that are building these physical AI models, that are candidly using networks like private 5G networks to get data to refine their models. It's when those models hit the field that I think the real fun begins. So, I mean, look, we are super excited. I think what's happening in the world. I think we can't even imagine what they will use the network for, and I think that's when you will have candidly other important things to solve, which is we will need the so-called OT side of businesses to truly embrace this wireless network. And that's a journey we have been on as we have been talking to these users. That is going to unlock, a combination of this technology, AI pieces coming together, and the organizational IT OT convergence. Now we are talking, I mean, genuinely industry is being transformed by what we are doing.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that physical AI is going to be a great use case for private wireless because I've been having a lot of conversations about security recently, and the way that's changing in the AI era, and just the idea of the idea of using a Wi-Fi network to control mission critical robots in a factory or that might be interacting with people is kind of scary to me in the world where attacks are ever evolving and the scale is bigger, and they might be able to soon break cryptography. So yeah, I think wireless networks, that what you said makes sense to me. But Assad, I mean, beyond AI enablement, what is your research telling you where things are headed?
AI enablement is a big, factor in, in terms of future growth. Beyond that, like we've got, I mean, we've got some of the smart automation use cases that will continue to, sort of drive growth. For example, AGVs. Right now, there's, the current situation is some of the pioneering manufacturers, they've kind of moved on from Wi-Fi to private 5G for connecting their AGVs, and the result we're seeing is like some of, initially what the numbers we were hearing is like, for example, if you go back to 2020, one Chinese manufacturer was telling us that they've kind of eliminated 70% of their dropouts since migrating from Wi-Fi to private 5G. Now, what we're hearing from the likes of Tesla and LG Electronics is like they've completely eliminated any dropouts, since migrating from Wi-Fi to private 5G, in the AGVs, AMRs. Um, some of the other applications, machine vision, and if you go to the wide area network segment, I mean, which is sort of separate from, what I'm talking about right now, is we've got Tetra GSMR networks for public safety and railway communications being replaced by initially by LTE and then eventually by 5G. That's going to be a big part of the market. Um, I mean, that's another aspect. And I mean, I'd like to add something on AI as well.
Yeah, go for
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Just when you're saying about Wi-Fi not being a reliable choice, Boston Dynamics, one of the manufacturers from the US, I mean, they've actually said that they don't even recommend, even though they support public cellular connectivity and private cellular connectivity for the robots. Their recommendation is that you use private 5G connectivity for more reliability and security. So you're kind of seeing the push from robotics manufacturers as well, you know, driving more adoption.
And just for anyone in our audience who may not be familiar, can you spell out what I think you said AGVs and AMRs?
Yeah, so essentially automated guided vehicles, so robots transporting equipment in factories, warehouses.
Speaking of new focus areas, we're talking about AI enablement. And so the logical next question is, AI is a crazy technology, right? So will it have different network requirements than a traditional network, or are the networks already up to snuff and the problem is getting AI connected to them? So, are there new requirements? Rajiv, maybe you can start on this question about networks and AI enablement.
There are new requirements, and we've been working with these AI application slash robot manufacturers a fair amount, and it almost splits into multiple categories. So there is a bare minimum where reliability becomes ultra important, and that's the stage we are at today, because a lot of what they call the safety application that really needs to maintain the control loop, so there is never any loss of communication that can lead to a safety incident. That is probably the most critical traffic driver today on AGVs and AMRs. But the increasingly where we are going is you're going to have these inference models run on these robots and these cameras and these devices. And so now you have a secondary problem where you need to orchestrate the models, because it's going to be yet another massive edge compute cloud that you're effectively running. And the primary connectivity to that edge compute cloud is going to be the private 5G network. So now you have an issue around how do you do firmware updates securely? How do you ensure security is managed? How do you ensure that this is done in a cost effective way? How do you ensure that that doesn't take into account the actual safety applications that we're running? There's a whole series of network requirements. I mean, the idea of slicing is really going to be pushed to its ultimate level, because a single robot is going to need 5 to 6 slices, right? If you imagine it's got a computer vision set of cameras and specific feeds after the initial inference need to be sent with high priority, that's a very different slice than the overnight batching the entire feed and then sending it for fine tuning and learning. And then you have the safety app, and then you have the actual model orchestration. So you are running into a whole new world of what is going to be driving the network requirements. And when you dig into that level of detail, is why the engineer slash technologist in me is so excited, because it's like, I mean, name one other technology that can do this. It's just not possible. You cannot do this any other way. If you want to do this securely, you want to run all of this, you want to do this at scale, private 5G is going to do it. And we are going to probably see a lot more development iteratively, because we are going to have to figure out on the network side how to ensure that we meet all of those SLAs as things change. Because in the end, it's a wireless network. These RF environments are really tough. And we are all going to use AI in turn to enable AI. So I think that's going to be an interesting element. And one last thing I want to add here is, I think when you think of the natural evolution of where slicing goes now, I think this is finally the place where what the operators have been looking for, which is the API economy, actually makes sense, right? And we it never really made sense as an API on an iPhone. That never added up. But when you now think of the robot manufacturer like a Boston Dynamics that Asad is talking about, that company and the 20 others who are building it and every variant of it, they are never going to be connectivity experts. They do not want to be thinking about all those streams of data and what is needed for each of them. What they need is, my application will call an API, and you need to give me the service that I need. And I think that's going to be the real final evolution of this. And so for me, in the next 12 to 18 months, a combination of these is really going to drive it. It's going to be around, how do you do the actual network service? How do you provide the dynamic nature of it to ensure reliability and security? And then last is, how do you provide the orchestration so that all of these applications can use this without becoming experts? I think there's a lot of innovation coming our way.
I would love to see the API economy actually become a thing. We've been hearing about it for so long, so we'll see if that happens. Assad, do you have anything to add on this point?
Yeah, so I mean, Rajiv's covered, I mean, the next few years very comprehensively. So I'll try to add the next, kind of cover the next decade somehow. So in addition to reliability and latency improvements, what we do expect to see is more and more bandwidth requirements. So, I mean, in pretty much many countries, you have like 100 megahertz required for private 5G, available for private 5G networks. Uh, by by the next decade, like say for instance, when we're in 2036, you'll be seeing a lot more wave, millimeter wave networks with like not just 100 megahertz, like 500 megahertz. Those sort of bandwidths, more and more higher definition image transmission, video transmission for applications such as um, machine vision, inferencing, everything, and even higher device densities as well, because you'll have a lot more devices connected to these private 5G networks that are actually being deployed today. So a network that's got like, say, for instance, 1,000 devices today is probably going to have 10,000 by that time, because you'll have so many sensors and so many additions. So that's sort of my take on the next decade.
That makes a lot of sense though, because we've known for years that millimeter wave is great for short distances, so campus deployments, factory
Yeah.
floors, all of that good stuff. So what you're saying, it jives with where things are headed. Last question for both of you to round out the discussion. What is one thing you think more people need to be thinking about or talking about when it comes to private wireless? Assad, do you want to leave off and we'll give Rajiv the last word?
Perhaps it could be the pricing of solutions, because I mean, there's this idea. A lot of people think it's way more expensive than Wi-Fi or some of the other alternatives out there. But I mean, in reality, it's not that expensive at all. Like if you really look at I mean, a single 5G access point is obviously more expensive than a Wi-Fi access point. But if you look at when you're able to replace like 20 Wi-Fi access points with just one 5G access point, like just look at the economics. Like it makes sense to deploy it. So I mean, that's one thing I think people, there needs to be a lot more awareness about that.
All right. And Rajiv, last word?
I think I'm going to reiterate what I said. I think if today I asked a CIO or a CFO what's strategic to them, they would probably say AI. I think they need to realize that without a wireless network infrastructure, that AI is not going to be very usable. So I would connect that dots very clearly. I am seeing it in the networks that we are building and the customers we are talking to, where the wireless teams that are able to explain that to the executive team is able to move fast on both dimensions. And then others are getting into this model of, oh my God, AI has sucked all the air out of the room, and now don't have budgets, I don't have people, I don't have any time. And now you're realizing too late into the whole story that, oops, we missed a critical element of the stack. So I think tying this AI revolution to the wireless infrastructure edge really cleanly for the exec level is a critical element that I think the world needs to know right now.
All right. I think that's a great place to leave it. So thank you both for your time, and to our listeners and viewers, wherever you are listening or watching, make sure you like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.